You forgave someone. You said the words, maybe you even meant them. And yet, months later, years later, something in you still keeps the record. Not loudly, not obviously, but it's there. In the way you tense when their name appears. In the way a small part of you waits for an apology that never came, for an acknowledgement that never will. So the question isn't whether you forgave. The question is, what did you actually do when you forgave? Because there are two very different acts that carry the same name. One is release, the other is surrender. One comes from a place of clarity. The other comes from exhaustion dressed up as virtue. And the world, every therapist, every self-help book, every person who has never been truly wronged, will tell you they are the same thing. They are not. Forgiveness has been sold to you as a moral achievement. As if the person who forgives the most, the fastest, the most completely, is somehow the most evolved, the most healed, the most free. But watch carefully what happens when you forgive someone who never asked for it. Watch what happens when you extend grace to someone who felt no guilt. You didn't free yourself, you freed them. You absorbed the weight of what they did and handed them back a clean slate they didn't earn. That is not healing. That is a transaction where only one side paid. There is a version of forgiveness that is genuinely powerful. It exists, it's real. It's the kind that happens after you've sat with what was done to you, fully, without rushing past it. And you arrive, slowly, at a place where carrying it no longer serves you. It arrives when you've looked at what happened with complete honesty and decided that carrying it forward would cost you more than releasing it. That decision belongs to you alone. It has nothing to do with what the other person deserves. But there's another version, the version most people perform. It arrives too quickly. It's announced almost like a press release. I forgive you, said out loud, sometimes even to people who showed no remorse, displayed as proof of character. This forgiveness is not release. It's a white flag. It's what happens when the pain of holding the truth becomes more socially inconvenient than surrendering it. When being angry makes you look difficult. When maintaining a boundary makes others uncomfortable. When the people around you need you to be okay, so you tell them you are. There are people walking around with a debt they will never acknowledge. They wronged someone. They moved on. They rebuilt their life, their image, their comfort, while the person they hurt was left to process the damage alone. And somewhere in that dynamic, forgiveness became the tool that made everything clean again. For them, the one who was wronged did the internal work, went through the grief, the anger, the confusion, eventually arrived at some version of peace, or at least the performance of it, and the one who caused it walked away lighter. This is the part nobody talks about. Forgiveness, when it's genuine, is an internal act. It doesn't require the other person's presence, their remorse, or their awareness. You can arrive at it completely alone. But when forgiveness is used as a social instrument, as a way to restore a relationship, to signal virtue, to end an uncomfortable tension, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a debt cancellation that was never negotiated. Think about what debt actually means. When someone owes you something, money, an explanation, an acknowledgement, and you cancel that debt without them ever recognizing it existed, you don't feel free. You feel cheated, because the release was yours, the relief was theirs. And that asymmetry doesn't disappear just because you said the words. It lives in the body. It surfaces in dreams. It appears in the way you react to certain tones of voice, certain looks, certain silences that remind you of what was never repaid. This is why people who claim to have forgiven someone can still feel the weight of it years later. It has nothing to do with weakness. It has nothing to do with holding grudges. It has to do with the fact that something real happened, and no amount of internal reframing changes the external reality of what was done. Forgiveness doesn't rewrite history. It doesn't restore what was taken. It doesn't make the person who wronged you any more accountable than they chose to be. It only changes what you decide to carry. And that distinction between what you carry and what actually happened is one of the most important lines a person can learn to hold. Watch the person who forgives before the conversation is even over, before the other person has finished explaining, before any real acknowledgement has been made, before the damage has even been fully visible. They're already saying it's fine. And if you ask them later, genuinely ask, they'll tell you they meant it. They believe they meant it. That's the part worth examining, because premature forgiveness is rarely about the other person. It's about what becomes possible the moment the tension ends. The moment you say it's fine, the room breathes again. The other person relaxes. The uncomfortable weight of conflict dissolves, and you get to be the one who made that happen. That feeling of being the one who restored peace is not nothing. For some people, it's the closest thing to power they've ever felt in a relationship. Not the power of being respected, not the power of having a need acknowledged, the power of being needed, of being the one who absorbs, releases, moves on. It's a role. And roles, once established, become identity. Adler called it the private logic, the internal framework a person constructs, usually long before adulthood, to secure their place in the world. For some, that logic sounds like, if I create no friction, I will not be abandoned. For others, if I am always the one who moves on first, no one can accuse me of being too much. And for others, if I forgive quickly enough, I never have to fully measure how much it hurt. That last one is the most consequential. Because measuring the hurt requires something most people spend years avoiding. Admitting that what happened actually reached you, that someone had enough presence in your life to cause real damage. For people who have spent years building the image of someone who needs very little, that admission feels dangerous. So they skip the measurement entirely. They move directly to resolution, directly to the part where they're composed again, where they're fine again. And then they wonder quietly why the weight never fully lifted. The wound wasn't processed, it was bypassed, and bypassed wounds don't disappear. They relocate. They show up in the way you tense around certain tones of voice, in the way you over-explain yourself in situations that don't require it, in the way you sometimes feel an anger with no clear address, diffuse, sourceless, chronic. That anger has a source. It lives in every moment you declared peace before you had actually found it. Every time you handed someone absolution they hadn't sought. Every time the record was cleared on paper, while something in you kept every line of it intact. The psyche is not sentimental. It doesn't accept performances as payments. What was not processed remains, accumulated, shaping the decisions you're convinced are free. Nietzsche had no patience for the morality of forgiveness. He understood something that most moral frameworks deliberately obscure, that the demand to forgive is, in many cases, a demand made by the people who benefit from it. Think about who gains the most when you release your anger quickly. Not you. The person who wronged you. The people around you who find your anger inconvenient. The social order that functions more smoothly when those who were harmed absorb their damage and return to baseline. Nietzsche called the impulse to moralize forgiveness a form of resentment in reverse, the weak demanding that the strong not react, that those with legitimate grievances swallow them. That power, when it manifests as anger, be immediately converted into grace. And grace, he argued, that is demanded is not grace, it is submission with better branding. Frankl approached it differently. He did not argue against forgiveness. He lived through conditions that would have given him every reason to. But what Frankl understood, and what he wrote about with a precision that still holds, is that meaning cannot be constructed on top of unacknowledged suffering. You cannot build something real on a foundation you've pretended doesn't exist. The anger, the grief, the full weight of what was done, these are not obstacles to meaning. They are the raw material of it. To skip them is not transcendence. It is avoidance dressed in the language of transcendence. And avoidance, no matter how sophisticated the justification, always extracts a price. What makes anger so socially dangerous is not its intensity, it's its legitimacy. An angry person who is genuinely wronged is a problem for everyone who needs the situation to be over. Their anger is accurate. It points at something real. And accurate anger, left standing, demands a response that comfort-seeking people are rarely willing to give. So instead of addressing it, they pathologize it. They reframe the anger as the issue. They position the person holding it as someone who can't let go, who is defined by their wound, who lacks the emotional sophistication to move forward. This mechanism is as old as human social dynamics. It takes the person who caused harm and repositions them as more advanced because they feel no guilt. And it takes the person who was harmed and repositions them as the problem because they still feel something. The one who acts without conscience is free. The one who was acted upon carries the weight of reaction. That inversion is not accidental. It serves a function. And recognizing that function, seeing it clearly, naming it without softening it, is not bitterness. It is precision. Anger, when it is proportionate and honest, is information. It tells you that something real happened, that a line was crossed, that what occurred left a mark, and that some part of you, the part that has not been fully socialized into compliance, refuses to pretend otherwise. That part deserves to be taken seriously, long enough to be understood, long enough to extract what it's actually telling you about what you value, what you will not accept, and what you owe yourself going forward. That is not a grudge. That is self-knowledge. This video exists in a specific territory, the kind of psychological examination that doesn't start with a solution and work backwards, that doesn't decide in advance what conclusion will make you feel better about yourself. It starts with what's actually there and follows it wherever it goes. This channel exists for people who are done with the surface version of things, people who have sat with enough discomfort to know that the easy answers were never answers at all. They were just ways to end the conversation faster. Every video here does what this one is doing. It goes where most content stops. It asks the question after the question. It stays in the room when the room gets uncomfortable. If that's the kind of content you've been looking for, the kind that doesn't arrive at comfortable conclusions, subscribe before this video continues. Because the next part of this video is where the real weight of this subject lands. There is a version of forgiveness that has nothing to do with the other person. It requires no conversation, no acknowledgement, no presence. It requires no pretending, no declaration of acceptability, no restoration of what was lost. It is a unilateral decision, made entirely within the person who was wronged, to stop organizing their inner life around what happened. Simply to stop paying rent on territory that belongs to someone who no longer deserves that kind of real estate in your mind. That is not surrender, that is reclamation. The distinction matters because the two acts produce completely different psychological outcomes. Surrender leaves you diminished. It asks you to make yourself smaller so that the situation can be resolved. It requires you to absorb what was done to you and convert it publicly into grace, regardless of whether you've actually processed anything. Reclamation moves in the opposite direction. It begins with a full accounting. It looks at what happened without softening it. It gives the anger its due weight, the grief its actual dimensions, the damage its honest assessment. And then, from a position of earned clarity, a choice is made. The choice to no longer let what happened determine what comes next. That choice is power. Internal, absolute, unannounced. Sartre argued that we are always choosing, even when we tell ourselves we have no choice. The person who forgives because they were told to, because the alternative felt too socially costly, because the anger was becoming inconvenient, that person is also making a choice. They are choosing to surrender the full truth of their experience in exchange for relief. And that exchange has consequences. It produces a version of peace that is conditional, that depends on not looking too closely, that functions only as long as you don't ask yourself whether you actually mean it. Real forgiveness, the kind that holds, is unconditional. It doesn't require the other person to change, to acknowledge, to suffer proportionately. It requires only that you be honest about what happened and deliberate about what you carry forward. That deliberateness is what separates forgiveness as power from forgiveness as performance. One produces freedom. The other produces a debt that never expires, paid in installments across years in ways you won't always recognize as payment. In the chronic, low-grade resentment that surfaces in unrelated situations. In the way you extend trust too cautiously or too carelessly because the original calibration was never properly reset. In the way you sometimes catch yourself replaying conversations that officially ended years ago. That is not weakness. That is the cost of a transaction that was never completed honestly. And the only way to complete it, the only way that actually works, is to go back to the moment you skipped, to give it the weight you denied it. To let the accounting be accurate before you close the books. At some point in this examination, the question shifts. It moves away from the person who wronged you, away from what they did, what they owe, what they will never acknowledge. And it lands with full weight on you, not delivered as accusation, arrived at as inventory. What have you been asking yourself to carry that you were never obligated to pick up in the first place? Watch what happens to people who carry unprocessed weight for years. They don't present as wounded. They present as controlled, precise, emotionally contained. Until a situation arrives, often minor, often disproportionate to their reaction, and something surfaces that has no apparent origin in the present moment. That reaction has an origin. It always does. Every bypassed accounting, every performance of peace that wasn't earned, every time the story got told with the edges removed to make it more acceptable, more digestible, more bearable for the people listening. Those moments don't vanish. They wait, and they resurface with an accuracy that the conscious mind, left to its own preferences, would never allow. What you owe yourself is not happiness, not resolution, not a version of the story where everything makes sense and the pain had a purpose. What you owe yourself is accuracy. The right to look at what happened and call it what it was, without softening the person who caused it, without inflating your own role to make the narrative more symmetrical, without rushing toward a conclusion that lets everyone, including yourself, off the hook too early. Accuracy is not the same as resentment. Accuracy is what makes genuine release possible. You cannot truly let go of something you have never fully held. The title of this video asked a question. Is your forgiveness a white flag, or a debt that never expires? By now you know the answer isn't found in whether you forgave or didn't forgive. It's found in the conditions under which the forgiveness arrived, in what you allowed yourself to feel before you declared it. Forgiveness that was performed will keep presenting its invoice, in the body, in the patterns, in the relationships that somehow replicate the original damage with different faces. It moves through years without a name. It appears in a reaction you can't fully explain, in the faint but persistent sense that something was never properly resolved. You are not obligated to forgive anyone on anyone else's timeline. You are not a better person for forgiving faster. You are not spiritually advanced for skipping the part that hurt. What you are, if you're willing to do this honestly, is someone capable of looking at what actually happened, measuring it accurately, and making a genuine decision about what to carry forward. Now, I want to be honest with you for a moment. This topic keeps pulling me back. It's one I return to precisely because the honest version of it rarely gets the time it deserves. We are surrounded by pressure to resolve things quickly, to be gracious, to move on. And I think that pressure costs people more than they realize. If this video made you uncomfortable, good. That discomfort has something to tell you. Subscribe.